This is London Calling. You're here with me, Tash, the Buccaneer, your source for what they don't want you to know. In today's world, we've all had to get used to our every move being tracked by the optic on our televisions, by the cameras around us, and with every click we make online. Seems like everything we do feeds the big data beast. Why are data giants like Blue so eager to get hold of our private information and our metadata? What are they using it for? Will we ever have real private lives again? What is privacy in the digital world? And what happens when capitalism and surveillance become one? As you know, we keep all those confidential. Speaking from a secure location, here's new technology strategist Charles, who worked all over the world trying to keep democracy strong in the face of the data assault.
If you have enough personal data on somebody, you're able to predict what it is that they're going to do. You can tell what they might be passionate about, but mostly you can tell what they fear. And if you can tell what someone fears, then you can manipulate them and you can move them in particular directions. Data is collected on citizens in every possible way. Data is collected through surveillance cameras. Data is collected from television sets. They don't even necessarily need to be super smart television sets. Data is collected from voter records. It's collected from how much power do you use in your house and how much water do you use in your house. In pre-crisis Britain, we got really used to all of our services being free. Everything suddenly became free that was digital. But what people forgot is that if you're not paying for it, then you're the product being sold.
If technology brings out the worst in capitalism, capitalism brings out the worst in technology. Senior academic Alfred tells us how big business repurposes big data.
Historically, what's happened, of course, is that people have traded their privacy for their convenience as kinds of technology came in and became mass consumed, mass used. Gradually, people were so attracted to the affordances of these technologies that privacy kind of retreated into the background and into a state we've got now where it's essentially gone. having this access to this data makes huge tech companies like Bloom so much more powerful than they would be otherwise, and not just in the obvious ways. Of course, there's a lot of worry and fear over what they can do with the data, can track anyone, find anyone, see what every individual is doing at any point in time. But I think there's even deeper reasons why this data empowers these huge companies to control our society and make us do things. So lots of predictive technologies which are implemented by these tech giants. It's not only interested in knowing what we're going to do, but influencing the patterns of our movement. So technologies might suggest routes to use in the city, places to go, restaurants to go to, cafes to go to, music to listen to. And these suggestions are not just predicting what we might like to do, they're actually influencing the way citizens move, think, eat, meet, and use their city as a space. So London has become a place where a small group of surveillance capitalist companies like Bloom can control the movements of individuals and orchestrate the way they move around their city and the way they essentially live, the things they do, the things they enjoy, and the life they lead. So we're really kind of outsourcing our decision-making, I would say, to a huge corporate capitalist company, and there's something very, very scary about that indeed. All these technologies can be used to not only influence us to act as the perfect consumer, but also to prevent us from doing radical and revolutionary things. So technologies in foreign nations that have been used are things like heat map features which show where populations are gathering. In-game rewards can be offered to people to take different routes, things like that. Traffic data can be manipulated to prevent people gathering and protesting, as has happened in some of the authoritarian regimes across the world recently. So what we're looking at is not only a set of technologies which make people behave as ideal consumers, but ones which actually can be put to use to prevent radical and disruptive behaviour in the city, which limits the power of any kind of revolutionary force.
So, if you thought you had a private life, get used to it. You don't. And we're not going to reclaim our lives without a fight. I'm Tash, and you've been listening to Bucking In, keeping the resistance informed. Keep listening, keep fighting, and remember, nobody owns you but you.
Hello and welcome to today's episode of The Upload. We're talking about the optic and how it's changed our lives. Now, as you remember, Bloom announced a new version of the optic at the recent Tone conference, but we haven't heard too much about that since due to the dramatic events there. Let's cast our minds back and consider the technology. I mean, the optic changed everything. It lets you see things in AR. You no longer need a smartphone. You just have the small implant that sends signals to your optic nerve and lets you see your emails, take calls, and browse the internet directly as if the screen was in front of your eyes. Instead of having to carry around a phone, you've just got this small handheld unit. So much lighter and so much more convenient. It's great.
Vicky, you sound like you absolutely love the optic. Do you actually think that it's made our lives any better?
I mean, sure, it's definitely made things a lot easier. It's so simple to call someone now. All you have to do is choose who you want to chat to, and they're there, ready to talk. And browsing the web is so much easier. I remember when you used to have to sit down at a computer with an actual keyboard and mouse and type everything out. And my favourite feature is public transport. With the optic, you can just walk straight onto the tube. It even acts as a passport. No longer do I have to dig around and try and find my old paper passport just to travel somewhere. Also, I thought that Optic's marketing strategy, making it free for people, was a stroke of genius.
Genius. Bloom was really calculated when it was doing that. It was pushing this draconian device on us at all. Sure, everybody flocked to it. There was free Wi-Fi and phone plans. That definitely helped, but it wasn't a case of this is a product that you need in your life.
Why do you hate it so much?
It's just the worst because you had to give up your privacy expectations and accept surveillance. It was almost like the government and Bloom didn't even need to make the optic mandatory. Making it mandatory was only to get the last holdouts across the line. If free data didn't convince you, fines and arrests from the state for not having the optic would pretty much be enough.
I mean, what do you mean by privacy problems? No one really talks about that anymore.
They don't talk about it because we don't have any choice when it comes to the optic. Yes, it's convenient and mandatory, but everybody's forgotten what it really means. Here, you've got a whole company owning basically all the data about your life. Bloom can see everything that you can see. Nothing is private anymore. There are so many times when I don't want anyone to have a clue about where I am, who I'm chatting with, what I'm doing. It's not even dodgy stuff, but I just don't want anybody to blackmail me with this in the future by hacking it. And because of Bloom's contracts with the government, it isn't just Bloom that can see everything I do, it's the government. The UK as a state has become a complete surveillance paradise.
I think you're painting a bit of a bleak picture. It's not all that bad.
No, you're completely wrong on this. I don't want everybody tracking me wherever I'm going around London.
Well, in that case, you might be interested in some rumours I heard. Did you hear that some DedSec hackers have found a way to bypass the optics connection with Bloom?
Are they actually making it better or usable or actually friendly for anybody?
Well, word on the street is that they've been able to create an encrypted signal, which means that your world might have a chance of becoming a bit more private again, so you could go back and enjoy all the great without that fear of surveillance.
With the optic, privacy's dead.
This is London Calling. You're listening to Buccaneer, your pirate podcast source for what they don't know. I'm Tash, and this time we're giving a special shout out from us to the boys and girls at the Signal and Intelligence Response Service, better known as SIRS. Why not? They're going to be listening anyway. They're listening to everything. But don't worry, we're not going to say anything bad about a massive, unaccountable spy organisation that uses its powers to stifle dissent and shut down free speech. Instead, we're going to look at how SIRS became so powerful. And as usual, we'll keep everyone's names and locations secret, so SIRS doesn't come looking for them. Ian was a veteran political writer and podcaster back in the days of pre-crisis Britain.
Is the world we're living in now fascist? Well, this is what fascism is. It is the complete and total control of the individual. The desire to basically say to the individual, nothing in your life matters. On an individual basis, you are now part of the whole, part of the nation. And the only meaning that you will find in your life is to become part of the nation. What is the nation? The nation doesn't mean anything, right? The nation is basically just encapsulated by the leader that takes over, that claims that he, has this sort of access to the soul of the country, to the soul of the people. He never does. It's just a myth. But that's what they go for. On that basis, they take the right to control every aspect of your life, from who you talk to where you eat, to where you go to hang out with your friends. I mean, what we're seeing now is a contemporary iteration of this process where you get corporations and the state operating in tandem, basically molded into one another. But that isn't that rare. I mean, this was exactly the same thing in Nazi Germany. You look at the concentration camps that operated in Nazi Germany, there were private companies in those camps making use of that slave labor. Fascism often works with corporations, and it's doing the same now. That's the way in which they track what you do. That's the way in which they track who you talk to. They operate as each other's proxies.
Charles is an expert in the dark arts of surveillance who worked to set up democratic media in post-communist states. How did it go so wrong in Britain?
We're looking at all the wrong things when we look at Britain's crisis. There's a lot of concentration on data and how that's been used and manipulated, and what we haven't looked at is the power structures and the profit that lies behind this. For example, if we examine what actually happened, there's a company that's really very interested in selling passports and making it easy to provide visas for investment and so on. And historically, throughout the world, they've been working with this big data manipulation company in order to overthrow governments. And then suddenly all the chickens came home to roost. Nobody could find any receipts for what was paid for. Nobody could figure out how things were done, but everybody had a feeling that something really stunk, and they couldn't figure it out. And yet, it was standing there in their face. There's a couple of different ways that we got where it is that we are. I mean, one, you have a lot of smaller organizations, smaller power groups, companies as well, who are bending things just a little, or compromise a little bit, will bend the rules a little bit, and try to achieve what it is that we hope to achieve that's good for us. And if you add all of that up, what you end up with is a big wall moving in a big way, from a lot of little buttons being pushed. But also there's this other thing that's going on here, is the gathering of data and the analysis of data has authoritarianism contained within its DNA. It is by its nature a tool for authoritarianism, and it has been used in that.
How does big data look into our lives? James covered it for the pre-crisis press.
We're starting to see the merger of private data and that with data held by the state into what are called social credit systems. This is where every aspect of your behaviour is monitored and totted up by a central system to sort of score you as a person, a bit like a credit card, but predicated on all of your behaviour rather than just the money you're spending. And this can have profound impact. We're starting to see systems emerge which will punish you and stop you from doing things in society based on your behaviours. And this can be as trivial as if you jaywalk, if you cross the road in the wrong place, you might lose points. If you do some community activities or help your neighbours, you might earn points. And then this can be used to sort of evaluate you as a person. And this could mean, for example, better travel privileges, being able to travel first class, or being denied from travelling first class to not being allowed to travel at all. These systems are very real and very possible because of all of the data that is now held on us.
So if your ears are burning and you think someone might be watching you, you're probably right. They're watching all of us. I'm Tash, and you've been listening to Buccaneers. Keep listening, keep sharing the show, and keep it encrypted. They're watching us, but we're watching you too. This is London Calling. You're listening to Buccaneers, your source for what they don't want you to know. With me, Tash. It's hard to believe that there could be shortages of food and medicine in an advanced country like ours, and yet here we are. Those old government promises of adequate food turned out to be just another lie. Today we're short of basic foodstuffs and vital medical supplies. Hundreds have already died of conditions that can be easily cured. The black market means that criminal gangs like Clan Kelly run our cities. And Prime Minister Dev Hasani isn't even around to pretend to care. How do we go from consumer paradise to a place of empty shelves and fighting for supplies? What turns a land of plenty into a wild west of hoarding, food battles and black market barons? We protect everyone who comes on the podcast by keeping their identities secret. Here's veteran political reporter Ian on the power behind shortages.
I mean, what was the first thing that happened when Britain sealed itself off? Like, the first stuff that got stopped from coming in was fresh food. I mean, we could live without the fresh food. I mean, everyone's quality of life got instantly worse, but we could live without it. The most damaging part was when the radioactive isotopes stopped coming in. Now, radioactive isotopes, that's what we use in cancer screening, cancer treatment. Now, that stuff, it has a short half-life. Technetium used to save hundreds of thousands of lives just by screening for cancer, let alone testing for cancer. But that stuff has a half-life of 66 hours. As soon as those walls went up, there was just no time to bring it into the country, and that is when people started dying. And then the medicines. The thing is, there's loads of medicines that you just can't stockpile. There was a moment before it took place when actually there was some effort to try and stockpile some of the medicines. There was some things that could be done. For a lot of it, there was simply nothing that could be done. We had a major problem with drugs for schizophrenia, so we saw such an uptick in the kind of attacks that you saw on the street and people suffering on their own because they didn't have the mental health drugs, because those drugs simply couldn't be stockpiled. We eventually found the same thing with foods that weren't produced in the UK. And the trouble with the UK was we don't produce our own food. We never have. For hundreds of years, we produced under half of our own food. So as soon as those walls went up, is having significant material problems in the country. I mean, Britain always told itself it had this national myth, right, that it would, because it got through the war, that it could go through any kind of hard. It wasn't really the case. People far more